Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we have Leori Sparktouched Hunter Planeswalker Tribal. This deck comes to us from Lexa, who has graciously supported the channel to bring their deck to the top of the list. Thank you so much, Lexa, for your ongoing support. And they say, been tinkering with this new commander. Was one of the ones that jumped out from Commander Masters. Feels like it needs someone less in love with planeswalkers than me to tell me which ones are actually bad ideas. I can definitely do that for sure. Planeswalkers are not necessarily my favorite type in Commander, so I will give it a critical eye. As always, this deck list is in the video description down below. And if you too were kind of intrigued by Leori and want to build a deck around them, this is probably a really good starting point as a kind of brainstorm towards what the deck could be. While you're in that video description, I would ask you to note that there is a form there you can fill out if you'd like to send me your own deck. That way I can take a look at it. And if you'd like your deck to be the next deck I make a video about, there is a link in there to bring it to the front of the queue. So, before we get further into this, who is Leori Sparktouched Hunter, and why are they our Planeswalker commander? Well, Planeswalker support commander, I should say. So Leori is a 3/3 for 3 in Jeskai colors, that's blue, red, white. Flying Vigilance. Whenever Leori's Sparktouched Hunter deals combat damage to a player, choose a Planeswalker type. Until end of turn, whenever you activate an ability of a Planeswalker of that type, you copy that ability and you may choose new targets. What does that mean exactly? Well, it means a few things. One, it means that generally we get to pick a Planeswalker that's on our battlefield and we get double activations. But it's actually a little more specific than that. We are choosing a Planeswalker type. So certain Planeswalkers will gain more advantage over this, such as Jace, Teferi, or Chandra, because there's just many more of these cards. So if we have 3 Chandra Planeswalkers in play, we get 3 copy effects. So this deck kind of, you know, it wants us to work a little more toward having tribal of a certain planeswalker. Now, I don't think we should go all in on that, but it's just a little bit that we get rewarded. After that, something to consider that we copy the ability. It's not that we get, 2 activations. What does this mean? Well, it means that if we're looking at Chandra, Acolyte of Flame, and we -2 her, we don't remove all of her loyalty counters by, subtracting 2 more and putting her to 0. The second ability will not activate or change her loyalty in any way. However, this goes both ways. In the same way that Chandra's Dress to Kill +1, or I guess either of her +1s, neither of those will give, when you copy them, will give an additional loyalty. So this doesn't speed up your planeswalkers toward, what should I say, toward their ultimates, unless there's a few exceptions. And I'm going to look quickly if any of them are here. And I don't see them. And I don't think they're here, but I think we can make it happen with our artifact, Ichor Gauntlet. So when our planeswalkers have the 0 proliferate ability from Ichor Gauntlet, if we copy that ability, we will actually get another counter on all of our planeswalkers, even though that's not how the ability is supposed to work. This also works really, really well with, there's a 5 mana Teferi, that's what I was looking for, that says whenever you draw a card, put an extra counter onto this Teferi, or loyalty counter. That works as well because he has a 0 that says draw a card. So you'll draw 2 cards and therefore get both loyalties. Now, that's not too important, but it's something that's worth noticing. So we're going to go through these planeswalkers and give this deck a bit of a look. I will say there's obviously a theme that this is kind of a deck that's in progress, namely because we have 2 sorceries and 0 instants. I would really love to add those instants and sorceries to make the deck a little more complete, but that's obviously not the point here. We're not there yet. There's I could take a moment to point out that you would really want cards like Generous Gift to deal with the myriad of hate that either directly or incidentally affects Planeswalkers, but once again, that's not the point here, right? I might talk about a few cards or support cards or ideas that I'd like to be in there, but I'm not going to go too much into it because this is about looking at our Planeswalkers. All right, so scrolling down, we have 32 Planeswalkers in this, and if we go to our mana curve, we can see that we have a grand total of 24 3-mana cards. This simply will not do. I think we can try to edge out a few of these planeswalkers from here or cards from here first, and then move forward from that point on to see what we can change otherwise, like for the other planeswalkers. But I think this is a good place to start. Our commander is 3 mana, and I say this every video where we don't want our commander to be the same cost as the majority of our deck, or a large part of our deck, or even sometimes more than a few cards if we're playing really tightly. This is too much, right? And we don't have a lot of support, some of which I'll suggest after the fact to get these cards out earlier. We're also missing a lot of one drops, which can alleviate some of the stress here, right? Because if we play our commander on turn 3, and then turn 4, we can play a 3-mana Planeswalker and a 1-mana card. It's just holding up Swords to Plowshares, Lightning Bolt, Spell Pierce, etc., etc. There's a lot of it gives us a little more play and reduces a bit of the burden that's on the 3-mana slot. At this point, until we hit 6 mana, we can't cast 2 spells a turn regularly, since the majority of our spells are 3 mana. With that in mind, let's take a look at our 3 mana slot. So what we're going to do is this is actually a really good one to view as spoiler, because all the cards are going to be in a row. And even then, they're still kind of small, so I'll click through them. Oh, not allowed. Apparently, you cannot click through them. Maybe I can zoom in. Ooh, no. After a while, it starts zooming out. Okay, let's use the top left to guide or the images to help you guys see what we're looking at. Or actually, I know this is against the point, but let's go back here because when I click it, the text is much more visible for you all. All right, let's start going through our 3-mana cards. There's a few things that I'm thinking about. Oh, sorry, there's one more thing I wanted to say about 3 mana. The thing that really exasperates how important the 3-mana slot is for us is that our commander needs to not have summoning sickness. So universally, we want our commander out before any planeswalkers. So thankfully, I don't think there's going to be a lot of planeswalkers that compete with our with our commander, because our commander is just so good. But some of these planeswalkers, we're going to have to judge them by how they work with Lutri out and attacking. The other thing to say, we're going to be thinking of criteria for these planeswalkers is, one, do they defend themselves or other planeswalkers? This is kind of the biggest problem here in a planeswalker deck, is that if you, let's say we're just playing a kind of mid-level power, where turn 1, nobody does anything, turn 2, people play generic 2-mana creatures, even let's say, Sakura Tribe Elder, or like Mana Dorks, or just like a 2/2 tribal creature. Doesn't really matter. We're not going to talk about Thalia, Dryadeth Magistrate, none of that stuff, Dark Confidant, none of the good stuff, just 2/2, just regular 2-drops. Then you play something like Chandra Acolyte of Flame. Let's just say you attacked with your Planeswalker, you used a bunch of abilities, and now it's your opponent's turn. Well, collectively, they have a lot of pressure that can go, oh, hold on, I guess your commander has Vigilance. So maybe this is not as bad. Let me confirm that. I feel like it has Vigilance, but I'm not sure. It does. Okay, that does alleviate the problem a little bit. But I will say, for what it's worth, your opponents can pressure out the rest of your planeswalkers pretty easily. So board clears are good, obviously. Any kind of defense is good, but mainly we're looking for our planeswalkers to have some kind of defense in it. So that's the first thing I'm really looking for. The second thing I'm looking for is, do they present a clock or a meaningful kind of power level in Commander? Because not all planeswalkers are as good as in Commander as they are somewhere else. Thirdly, I am looking at how prevalent is this Commander type, and fourthly, I'm looking at how good are these abilities copied. Maybe I should change that order, but still, these are the four things I'm looking at in no particular order. And I'm not going to go over all of them for each planeswalker, but that's the whole idea. We're doing planeswalker review time, so we're going in depth for each of this. So Chandra, Acolyte of Flame. So funnily enough, as I was talking about her earlier, I forgot that her 0 is one of those really good to be copied abilities where she's going to put 2 loyalty counters on all your red planeswalkers. Chandra is really, really good at a defensive kind of setup, not defensive, like a red uh, planeswalker slash Chandra associated theme. She gets really, really good when you have a bunch of red planeswalkers doing a bit of a 0 mana proliferate style ability the more you have. Her other abilities aren't as good. Her second 0 is, what is it? It's just basically attack for 4 if copied. And even then, that's not actually how it works because you have to attack. This has to be after attack, right? Because you've hit with your commander. So that 0 is just never going to be used, the second 0. So that's off. And then her third one, cast instant or sorcery card with mana value 3 or less. Well, until you put the instants that I desperately want you to put in, we're not there yet. But when we do, we have quite a big selection. So I would say the power of this card is highly dependent on how well your instant and sorcery slot is and how many red and or Chandra planeswalkers you have. So this is build around territory. Let's move on. Our next Chandra has, let's see, her first ability is to add mana and deal to one damage. The second one is to exile 2, and the last one is just an ultimate. That's fine. So I like this. I like Chandra Just to Kill a lot. I think for a while people were thinking she was like strong enough to see play in other like more eternal formats. I don't know if anything came from that in like Pioneer or something, but I think she is really, really good. She does two things we do really want her to do that work really well when copied. She creates mana and she pseudo draws cards. Except she doesn't actually draw cards. You need those cards to be red. So if you're going all in on red cards and red planeswalkers, this is really, really good. Up until that point, it's particularly bad. So if Chandra Acolyte of Flame was like good to build around Chandras, this is like you need to build around Chandras and red planeswalkers to get this ability going anywhere. And it is, excuse me, it is interesting to take a 3-color commander and like focus on one of the colors. Some people don't like that, but I think it's always a strategy that's available that's criminally underused. And if you go more into red, you get a lot more, let's say, a lot of powerful cards that you don't have access to if you don't like really dip into red, such as, Blood Moon is a really, really big one, but a bunch of like more red-based board clears and things like that that can keep the board wiped. So something to consider. And Blood Moon would be really, really good in a deck like this. So I leave that to you to decide. But as of now, in a 3-color deck, Chandra Just to Kill doesn't make the cut. Dak Faden is really, really good. I don't think anyone's ever complained about Dak Faden in Commander. The ability to steal just a mana rock, and then if doubled, steal 2 mana rocks when he comes down, is just really, really good. And his plus is also very strong as well. I think this is just a fantastic card and does belong here. Gideon Blackblade is strange because you cannot use his abilities before combat if you're picking him to be copied. Otherwise, he just beats face, right? And I don't think that's what we want. He can't even defend other planeswalkers. In fact, I'm pretty sure none of our planeswalkers so far can defend each other, which is kind of a big problem here. And so Gideon, as a beater, is just really unattractive here. Though Gideon is one of our main like white planeswalkers we see a lot, that Ajani and Elspeth. I would like us to lean towards more Elspeth maybe even a Johnny, but mainly Elspeth than Gideon, because Gideon is a combat-oriented planeswalker and therefore is not really where we want to be. Jace Cunning Castaway. Well, for the first time, we can create tokens to defend ourselves and our planeswalkers. I think that's the main thing you're going to do is you're going to play this in -2 immediately to get bodies, and then you can slowly plus him. Once again, his plus just doesn't work well um, with the copy ability because you have to use it before the copy ability. And so most likely you're playing this card for its -2. Is that -2 particularly good? I don't think so. I think this is pretty bad. Like, if we're comparing this, I'm just thinking to like the Nissa that creates 0/1 plants, right? We just want token production pretty much up front because it's the most valuable thing we can get because it allows us to defend our planeswalkers. Whereas this, he has to go down to 1, and then he either needs 1 turn to get back up to 2, or 2 subsequent turns so he doesn't remove all his loyalty counters to -2 again. The -5 is relatively interesting because it works really well with Lutri. Lutri, my goodness, it's not Lutri, it's Leori. Um, but it's still tricky. Is this deck playing? Who's our companion? Is it the one with the Z? Ooh, I can't spell companion. Companion. Our red-white one. Zerda. Are we playing Zerda? I don't think we are. Creatures, creatures, creatures. We should definitely play Zerda, right? No, that's not how that works. Hold on, let's go back here. Because Zerda doesn't reduce anything about activated abilities about planeswalkers, but if you make Zerda work, you do get it as a free companion, and it is a 3/3 that can block. It is another 3 mana card, but if you can make a companion work, it's often really, really worth it. So I'll leave that to you to decide. But this is something that just came to mind. Okay, so if you can get Jace's -5 to happen, you have something really cool there because with copies, you get 4 copies of Jace, and then each of those copies -2. So you get 4 copies, and then you get 8 2/2s. So that's really cool, but really the only reason I would play this card. And I don't like playing Planeswalkers in order to get them to ultimate, but for what it's worth, something to think about. All right, moving on. Jace, Mirror Mage, Kicker. And if you kick them, they come in copies with 1 loyalty. Scry, draw a card. Ugh. Okay, this is a bit strange. So, unlike all the other ones, first of all, I wish this was multi-kicker. I think that would be a lot more fun, but it's not. But unlike all the other ones where when we -2, we get the perks without the downside. Sorry, when we -2. When we use the copy ability on a minus ability, we get the perks without paying the extra loyalty. This one doesn't work here. Jace the Mirror Mage's 0 still will remove loyalty from Jace Mirror Mage. And because of that, we're just like burning out our Jaces really fast. Like this Planeswalker won't stick around. So I don't particularly like it. Still doesn't protect himself or any other Planeswalkers. And Scry 2, though it's not bad, has a limit on how good it is, right? Because if let's say we play this, we kick it, we hit with Leori, and then we scry 2 4 times. If one of those cards stays on top, the rest of the scry 2s are scry 1s, right? If you scry 2 right away and get the 2 cards on top, the other 3 are wasted. I don't know. For what it's worth, I guess something to think about is that, you see, I wish it was extra activations. Because if you did extra activations, you could do something really cool where you scry a land to the top, then use the 0. Then you scry another land to the top, and you use the 0. And therefore get the cards you want, or you scry cards that, Jace's loyalty can take, and then you use them. But you can't. You have to do both scries, and then you have to do both flips. So really don't like this here. Definitely cut this. Mu Yanling, Thank goodness she can create a token. Unfortunately, she cannot take it and create a token on the turn she goes down. How heartbreaking. However, she has a pretty cool +2, where she can reduce the power of one creature. And doing this twice is actually pretty relevant, because you could take down a few cards that can either evasively hit or attack through your commander. So I like Mu Yangling, even though you don't have another Yangling um, Planeswalker. I think she's still really good. And though her ultimate isn't great and can't be copied really, I think she's still good enough to keep around. I play her in my cube. I like her a lot. Saheeli Rai, still, still no protection for our planeswalkers. This is worrying, right? I don't know how many options that we have to actually protect our planeswalkers that are available, but on planeswalkers, it's just something that I'm noticing is missing. Saheeli Rai is really, really dependent on what creatures and artifacts you have in your deck, and you need to be able to use them right now. Obviously, if you put the Fedalar Sovereign in here, and you can just use that to constantly flicker Saheeli Rai, you are going to win the game. If you are not playing that, I don't recommend playing Saheeli Rai. She works with really good ETBs or really good hasty creatures or creatures that benefit from attacking. This ain't it. This is not the kind of deck you're building, so I would cut her pretty easily. Saheeli Sublime Artificer, I like more because from the moment she goes out, she starts creating blockers for you each turn. Now, those blockers are really easy to be pressured by your opponents, but consider your commander is also a blocker, you might be in a pretty good position. That being said, I don't know about her -2. Like, you don't really need to copy it because you can just use it regularly a few times, like twice without a problem, and more if you proliferate. But she's an okay planeswalker, and she kind of is better in this deck, but doesn't really use the commander so much. So I would be pretty critical of her. Teferi Time Raveler, nothing to say. A fantastic, fantastic planeswalker. Obviously, the +1 does nothing copied, but the -3 is very, very good. Teo, Geometric Tactician. So this is a new one. When he ETBs, you get a 0/4. So already, I love this. You get a blocker with him right away. This +1, you and target opponent each draw a card. This is fine to copy. It's not ideal. At least you can pick 2 different opponents when you copy it. But it's just fine. It's card advantage, and you get to kind of be political with it. -2, choose left or right. Until your next turn, each player may only attack in the nearest opponent, only the nearest opponent in the last chosen direction, and planeswalkers controlled by that opponent. This cannot be copied. It is strange that these 2 cards are in a deck together naturally. If you copy this, it's just going to overwrite the previous one, right? You pick, well, I say right. You pick right, and they have to attack right. Then you pick left, then they have to attack left. It doesn't make them go, well, I can't attack in right and left, and therefore I can't attack. All it does is just overwrite the previous one. So you're playing this for the card draw and the defense, which I think is fine. I think this is a fine 3-mana Planeswalker, and I like that Teo puts a defender out. The Royal Scions. Royal Scions you would probably be using for the double loot. The nice thing about this deck is that I think if you can play as many of these as possible, and if you're playing a bunch of Wills or Rowans, and then you pick Will or Rowan, Royal Scion is always active. So that's pretty cool. However, you're almost primarily using her, or them, I should say, sorry, for the first +1 and not the second one. Once again, I don't think you really care about, like, it could go on your commander, which isn't bad, but double strike would have been the one you wanted, not first strike. Their ultimate is really, really good, but not great. I think this is just double looting, and I think that's just fine. Once again, Royal Scions don't protect themselves. Not really the greatest planeswalker to be putting in a deck like this. All right, we are into 4 mana. I would say a lot of the 3-mana cards, I didn't really like a lot of these planeswalkers. Unfortunately, we don't have an endless access to the best planeswalkers because we're color limited, but a lack of planeswalkers that create tokens or defend themselves is a little worrying at the 3 slot. Let's see what we can change at the 4 slot. Bad news, Johnny Steadfast does not protect themselves. I do like that the -2 will put a bunch of put a loyalty counter on each planeswalker, each other planeswalker, and when you copy it, that's basically proliferate 2, except for on this planeswalkers. But if you have Ichor Gauntlet or Ichor Gauntlet, I don't really remember what the name is, you just use the 0 instead of the -2, right? So not bad, not the worst. Is he supposed to be an Avenger? Is that what's going on? Why does he look like a X-Men character? Regardless, cool character. I like a Johnny, but maybe not the best version of him here. Chandra Fire Artisan, another planeswalker that cannot defend itself, and but as loyalty is removed from her, she deals damage to a player or a planeswalker. Here's the thing, though. She's going to die really, really fast, and that 6 damage that she can reflect, let's say, let's say you get her to 6 and someone knocks her and destroys her, you know, that's 6 damage. That's really not that much, so I don't particularly like that. And you can't copy the passive abilities, so once again, it doesn't really work well with a commander. Her +1 is pretty good, don't get me wrong. Being able to pseudo draw 2 when copied isn't bad if you're going to full Chandra where this gets better. It's still not great. She still doesn't defend herself. It's one of the things I don't like about Chandra is Chandra is very, very bad at defending herself, and a lot of her abilities benefit you from playing more and more Chandras, and they still cannot defend themselves. So, though I see the direction this can be in, I'm not too impressed by her here. Let's keep going. Chandra Torch of Defiance, definitely one of the stronger Chandras. I do like she has the thing that Dress to Kill does that I really liked, where her 2 main abilities, excuse me, her 2 main abilities are pseudo card draw and mana generation. And I like that. I like these are really, really good to copy. I like that she has a -3 that's really good to copy. I think this is an excellent addition to the deck. And if you are deep into Chandras, this is even better because her abilities get better and better. The more red you're into, the more, Chandras will get to trigger off of the copy ability. You'll be very happy. So very good inclusion. Comet Stellar Pup. All right, roll a 6-sided die. If 1 and 2, make some squirrels. If 3, you get a 2 mana or less creature card from your hand. If 4 and 5, you deal damage to a creature or player. And 6, you get to do this 2 more times. I mean, I'm going to tell you, this is a fun card. I will not take that away from you. This is a very fun card based on luck. You'll have plenty of dice because, well, you need them for loyalty counters. And this is kind of silly. I do like that there's a 33% chance to create tokens. Once again, defense is really where my brain is at. And I do really, really like that. I don't like that his middle ability, the -1 ability, which is the lowest, the second, tied for the lowest chance to get. It can't bring any of your planeswalkers back. I don't like that because it's 2 mana or less. But I do like that it's any 2 mana, so you can bring lands back, and instants and sorceries are pretty happy to be put back into your hand. That being said, I think if you can guarantee getting squirrels, which you can't, but the odds are pretty high, you have basically, if you count 6 as another chance to get squirrels, I think we don't exactly have a 50% chance to get squirrels, because I don't know this math. Don't ask me this math. But I think the odds are good to get squirrels, and if you get squirrels, you're going to be very, very happy. Also, when you copy this ability, you get another roll. It doesn't just copy the output. So that's really interesting to me, and I do really like it. So I do like Comet in this deck. It's really funny if nothing else. So very, very good. And once again, creating any defense, I'm really, really happy with. Commodore Guff. So I believe this is the main Planeswalker from the Planeswalker deck. At the beginning of your end step, put a loyalty counter on another target Planeswalker you control. I like that it's end step. All right, create a wizard that can tap to cast Planeswalkers, and then -3 is deals X damage and draw X cards, where X is the number of Planeswalkers. All right, so really, really good. Obviously, this is a pushed card for the commander set, and Obviously, there might have been some contention of which of these two you might want to use as a commander, or if you were very much immediately on the cat. I will say, for what it's worth, I do really like this in the 99 because it works really well with Leori. Well, and just getting any of these abilities doubled is pretty good. Let's go through our next few planeswalkers. How far are we? Because I want it to be a bit faster. We're about a bit more than half. Okay, I'm going to speed up for these last few because we're at 30 minutes. But Elspeth Knight Errant, love it. Makes tokens. Already a big fan. Elspeth Sun's Nemesis, love her. Makes tokens. Big fan. I don't really. I like the fact that the escape ability is possible, but I just don't see how quickly you're going to be able to put 4 cards in your graveyard. So not as great, but I do like that she makes tokens, and when you copy it, she makes 4 tokens. That's pretty good. Jace Mind Sculptor, no one's going to complain about this. This is a very good card. Nahiri the Harbinger. You need a target. You need a very big target for the -8 because it is very realistic that you're able to do that. And I guess Chain Veil is really it. So I don't mind that, though it requires a lot of mana. But it's very easy to get her to 8. It's 2 activations, right? And so with that, plan around defending her, plan around getting her out, getting her to 8, and then getting Chain Veil and continuing to do what you do. So good inclusion here, love it. Narset, very good. I think almost universally, yes, no problems here. I really like her +1. I think it's very good in a deck like this. And then her -2 is okay as well. You'll be pretty happy with her kicking some of the creatures in the face. Teferi, Master of Time, is interesting because doesn't exactly work with our commander, but is still a pretty cool card. I think this is a tricky card to use. Obviously, very good in Planeswalkers because you have so many turns to keep looting and keep adding counters. But obviously, I think this works really well with the Gauntlet that you can proliferate every single turn. The -3 is really good. And if you really need to do something, you can use it on the turn your commander hits. But remember, that means you have to do it on your turn, and it will come back. Like, this is a very specific thing because it has to be after you attacked, and it's going to phase something out until that person's turn. So if you have a great big monster, I'm afraid of, a great big creature, I can't phase it out and another creature because when it gets to your turn, you just untap with it and attack me again. So it's not particularly good in that sense. But if you politic and you work with the other players at you get rid of my blocker so that another player can defeat me, that's definitely something good. So there are some exceptions, but overall, Teferi is here as being a good time, but just not specifically with your commander. Wandering Emperor makes 2/2s, except for the fact that you cannot copy her abilities. Why, you might ask? Well, she doesn't have a Planeswalker type. She is just a Planeswalker card. She has no type outside of that, and therefore you cannot copy her abilities. This is a bit of a downside. I notice you're not playing the other 4-mana Elspeth that came out recently. I would just replace Wandering Emperor with that. The Flash is interesting, but I think you're playing at sorcery speed anyways. I think you'd just be happier to just, have the other Elspeth here. Chandra, we're at 5 mana. Chandra, Legacy of Fire. This is obviously from the this same commander set? Sure, I think so. Just good. Just good. Just generally good. I have no. The second 0 doesn't work well when copied, but that's not why you're playing her. You're playing her for her +1, which is particularly good, and when it's copied. Now, once again, works a lot better in a Chandra deck where you're basically paying red for more Chandras or other red planeswalkers and abilities. So definitely, once again, better there, but here, not bad. Still doesn't protect herself or anyone else. Though it is interesting that end step she does hit all your opponents, but even then, it's probably going to be 3 to 4 damage, which isn't that impressive. Elspeth Resplendent, one of the only Elspeths that doesn't create any defense for herself. If you want to play something like this, she's almost like a Gideon or an Ajani where you need creatures out first and foremost, and then you can use them to defend her. Otherwise, unfortunately, I don't really love it. I do like, actually, that being said, I'm looking at her -3 a bit. I guess you play her for the -3. You copy it, you play her -3, and you put 2 more planeswalkers on the battlefield. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, I see why she's here, and she should stay for sure. Jace, Unraveler of Secrets. Uh, no, this is very bad. I guess the -2 can be good to, I don't know, to bounce 2 creatures, but even that doesn't feel really good. And scry 1 and draw a card, though it is card advantage when copied. Unless you're really deep in Jace cards, I wouldn't play this one. I think it's too much mana for what it does. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, is very, very good. It, he untaps lands at end of turn, so until you have your instance set up, it's not as good because the entire purpose is that you have then a bunch of mana floating, which is really good when copied. And I think that's really, really good. His -3 is pretty good. You can tuck a few cards in. Tucking is much better than bouncing. I think this is good, but also you have to kind of build around him. If you build around him correctly, you can set up really, really good turns where you're basically untapping 4 mana at the end of turn, and you use that mana to protect your planeswalkers and yourself and use counter spells. And I think that's really cool. I'm going to touch back on that in a second, but I'm going to try to finish this off quickly. Vronos is another one that I believe is from this commander set. So you phase out 2 target planeswalkers, and then for each opponent, return up to 1 non-land permanent that player controls to its owner's hand. Okay. And something about artifacts, which we don't particularly care for. We're really using Vronos for the first 2 abilities, both of which are really, really good. I do really, really like Vronos. I like the fact that you can phase out your planeswalkers to keep them protected, and copied, that's 4 planeswalkers you phase out. I think that's really cool. He can't phase himself out, which I don't love, but that's fine. And then his -2 when copied is really, really good. Bouncing isn't that great, but when you're bouncing for like 3 permanents each time, I think it's definitely worth it. So this is a very good inclusion, very much like this. Chandra in Awaken Inferno. This is a lot of fun. I do really, really like this. If you copy her ability, sorry, you will destroy your commander. Even if you don't copy her ability. Just their -2 will destroy your commander. But I do really, really like her +2, and the fact that it can't be countered. I think her -X is also really good with the copy ability because you keep the X as what it is, so you're happy just to destroy 2 creatures this way. But I think you play this and immediately +2 twice, pinging everyone 2 damage. Chandra Awakened Inferno should be in every version of this deck. It doesn't matter if you go deep into Chandra's or any other Planeswalker. This should be in there. It's just really, really good. If she survives a turn cycle, which there's a high chance she can, you then can, if you uptick her twice and then uptick her twice more, each opponent are taking 4 damage per turn, and that's just so good, right? Then you can just play defensive as your opponents just get burnt out of the game, and I really, really like that. Chandra, Hope's Beacon is the newest Chandra. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it. You need instant spells and sorcery spells for this creature, but so far I like it. Add 2 mana in a combination of colors. I like that. Exile the top 5 until end of turn. You may cast instants or sorceries. So I believe this is our last Planeswalker. Let me confirm this, and I can go into what I want to say. No, we got one more. Okay, let's get back to this, but it does do the 2 things I really like, where it pseudo draws cards and it pseudo adds mana. Elspeth Sun's Champion, just great card, no matter what. I did have additions. My goodness, this is a tough video because we had to go through all the Planeswalkers, but I hope you've been around for this. Okay, I'm going to come back to what I was going to say about Chandra's Hope's Beacon in a second. Let me say the cards I want to suggest first. Really, really quickly, I want to suggest 3 cards at least that can be played on the first turn and tap for mana the next turn. Strike It Rich gives you a treasure. Skirk Prospector sacrifices itself, and Goldhound also actually does both. It is a treasure, and then you sacrifice itself to gain 1 mana. All of these let you play your commander on turn 2 or play a planeswalker on turn 2. I think you want to play the commander, but for what it's worth, that's what that is. I think these are all really, really good inclusions because the speed of how well your deck works is intrinsically tied to getting your commander out early. I did have one more, 1 mana red dork, but Ragavan is an expensive card. And if you don't own one or you're not on MTGO, and even then, it might be cost prohibitive. So, though, you know, you'll figure it out if this card is for you, it would be a mana dork in a deck like this. Finally, the last card I was just going to support because I don't know if you've thought of this. Board the Weatherlight is look at the top 5, reveal a historic, which means a Planeswalker card as well, off out of those top 5 and put it into your hand. I do just like this card. I think this card gets forgotten about a lot in Commander decks, and I think it is very, very good. All right. Going back to what I want to say about Hope's Beacon, and basically what I want to say about the deck. Here are my thoughts. I think there's a few Planeswalkers I mentioned that are just good. Play all of those. Just to have a good time playing all of those. But then you're going to need to kind of decide what direction your deck is going to go in. And some of these directions make more sense than others. The full-on Elspeth direction, I think you'll have the most success with because she often creates protection for herself and other planeswalkers through tokens. And that's going to be really, really helpful in the early to mid phase. And then with a critical amount of Elspeths, when you hit with your commander, you start being able to produce way, way more tokens. And then a lot of our Elspeths have abilities that buff or otherwise grow tokens. Now, some of them only work like for the turn, so pre-combat they're not very good. But a few of them, I'm thinking mainly Sun's Champion with her emblem, are just really, really good and you want to strive towards. I mean, this card is just really, really good in general. The other way to build a deck like this is to focus very much so on the non-creature, instant, and sorcery half of this deck. So I think of cards like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. I think of Chandra, Hope's Beacon, which lets you cast instants and sorceries. I think of Narset, who lets you cast instants and sorceries. And with those ones in mind primarily, I think, and you could add some Jaces to that who might work. I think those are really, really strong when you build a very nice collection of instants and sorceries to be casting, to be kind of a Planeswalker spell slinger deck. That one's really tricky to build, but I think that one would be the most fun and the most effective, where you're still holding down the fort using your spells, using red board clears, white board clears, counter magic, removal. But the way you accrue advantage during this time is by having your planeswalkers out and them just passively adding cards and mana to your pool so that you can just keep going while still controlling the board, sorry. I used to play a Queen Marchesa deck that every now and then just calls out to me. And the purpose of the deck was that once you got the Monarch, you were given the constant card draw you needed to be able to keep the board in a state that you really prefer. And this might be a better version of that. With the right planeswalkers, you can flash back your instants and sorceries, you can draw cards or exile cards off the top of your deck, you can make mana to use on these things, and you can just control the situation while growing your board of planeswalkers turn by turn. That would be my recommendation. I think that's definitely the one I'd recommend. So what I'm going to say is take a look at these ideas, find the direction you want to play. Because the thing is, for what like Leori is cool, and I'm really glad Leori is not 5 colors. I really hate when there's a tribal deck and it's just 5 colors. It kind of takes the fun away. This is a restrictive deck, right? We only have 3 colors. However, a lot of some of the best drop them and gain a huge amount of advantage with no work planeswalkers are in green and black. Namely, I'm thinking a lot about Liliana. Losing Liliana is really, really rough here. And instead of us sitting around here and being like, well, I guess we don't have Liliana, I don't know why we're playing this deck, instead let's think about what we do have and build a deck around them. So with that in mind, definitely you're going to have some cuts. 32 is a lot. Though it'll be really, really fun to put in a situation where you have as many planeswalkers as your opponents have creatures, because so many of them can't protect themselves, you're kind of just opening yourself up to losing, because every turn you play another planeswalker who then gets knocked out of the board by attacks, and every turn your opponents are developing their board. So your board just keeps staying the same at one or two planeswalkers and them dying every turn, and your opponents are getting more and more cards that facilitate them destroying your planeswalkers. So we can't play this many planeswalkers, so we just need to find the kind of groove to make it work. I hope this deck assist video was helpful. It is kind of tricky. This is a difficult deck to build, and I do really like the directions that we can go into. Like I said, Spell Slinger Planeswalker Tribal sounds so cool in my head. And if you think that's cool too, we can do another draft and another look at that deck in that direction. But otherwise, I hope the criticisms on the Planeswalkers help you pick the ones you want. I definitely have a much harsher eye on Planeswalkers than most, so I do hope that is helpful. If you do want to send me the next draft of this deck or any deck, you can check the video description for a link to the form to fill out. And if you could like, comment, subscribe, do the whole YouTube thing, I would be very, very grateful. The channel is still growing and any support is helpful. All right, we got a 46 minutes, so I'm going to cut this off here, but I'm really excited if you do make another version of this deck, I am very excited to see it. All right, good luck.